5 p.m. Eastern.
Oh, we're going to cut that out. Okay, let's start again. Okay.
It's Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, so you know what that means. It's time for another episode of Event Icons, presented by Endless Entertainment, the show where you get to ask the icons of the events industry anything. So, you might be wondering, how do you get to ask questions? All you have to do is use the question panel on the right of GoToWebinar to submit your questions. Or you can hop on Twitter to submit your questions with the hashtag Event Icons. We'll be answering your questions live during the entire show. Before we get started, the more people we have watching, the better conversation we can have. So please help share hashtag Event Icons on Twitter and Facebook. Just tell your friends to watch at www.event-icons.com. Now, without any further delay, this is hashtag Event Icons with your hosts, Will Curran of Endless Entertainment and Laura Lopez of Social Tables.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Event Icons. I'm your host, Laura Lopez with Social Tables. The subject of today's show, I'm very excited. It's writing content for event planners. So if any of you read blogs, watch videos, sign on to webinars, we are here today with a guest that can tell you how we get it done in the industry. It's actually my colleague, David Budimir. David, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going? Hey, Laura, thanks so much for inviting me on.
Of course. Thanks for joining us. So we like to start off every show with a little intro. So tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your role and what got you in the events industry?
Sure. So I started out outside of the industry in marketing. So all kinds of digital marketing, including like social media marketing, content marketing, and marketing operations. But then when I learned about Social Tables, that was sort of my first job in the events industry, where I started on as the manager of content marketing. So specifically that meant kind of learning about what event planners care about in order to grow their businesses and creating educational content that we can put on our blog or we can put into various ebooks to help kind of like educate folks in the industry and also make them aware of our brand as a result of that. So I've been working here for about a year and a half now, a little bit longer. And so far I love it. I love interacting with different planners in our industry along with the properties that we work with and just learning more about what's important and the various trends that are relevant to the audience, to event planners.
Awesome. Do you have a favorite event planner you like working with?
Other than you?
Yes, other than me.
So I don't work directly with the folks that have their sleeves up and are planning events. I know that a lot of from the clients that I've met, a lot of our catering clients to get into a niche of the industry are some of my favorites, just because they're always so hospitable and they're always looking for such a good time. So right now, that's my favorite part of the industry, is the people that kind of try to reach you through like the food and the food experience of the event.
Cool. Now, if you weren't working in the events industry through Social Tables or content, is there another calling that you have career-wise?
I think.
So what would that be?
I think that if I wasn't with Social Tables right now, and with the caveat that I had unlimited money, I think I would be a YouTube vlogger, where all I do is vlog on YouTube. So it's a little related to self-marketing, and also content creation. But I think if I had the choice, that would be the track that I'd want to go down.
And fun fact for everybody who's watching, David is a prolific vlogger. He does have his own YouTube channel. You can Google it. It's fantastic.
Yeah, but I'm not going to share the link.
We're not going to share the link. You have to find it for yourself. All right, so let's get into some of the questions that I have for you about content and how it relates to the industry. So, and then also for those of you who are watching today's show, if you have a question for David, feel free to use the chat box and we will answer them in queue. So any question about content, anything like that. So now what kind of content do you like to read and consume yourself? And who are some of the compelling writers in the industry that you follow closely?
Sure. So when I'm looking for something that's going to like enhance my knowledge professionally in the event industry or in marketing, typically I'm looking for something that's digestible very quickly. Most of the time, when I'm researching something, the content I come across is coming through Google. So I'm looking for something that's going to get my questions answered very quickly. And also, I've increasingly been like gravitating towards videos because it means that I can sort of work on other things while I'm trying to learn about what I'm researching or get the information that I need. So right now it's kind of those two things, whatever is fast, like I can consume quickly, or consume while I'm multitasking and doing something else.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I was just going to say, like, what's a recent example of something that, you know, maybe a video that you watched that you were able to multitask to, or maybe a video that you can share that really taught you something?
Sure. So I guess in recent history, this is only like tangentially related, but I was trying to learn more about revenue management and what revenue managers do, because that is like a subset of our customers. So these are folks that will work with a hotel to try to make sure that they're putting the best or highest prices they can put on their rooms and their event spaces. So there are a lot of videos out there where it's people kind of rehashing their blog content, but in video form, with like a handful of animations. So that's something that I could research, write my notes on as the video was going, and kind of create like my own content related to revenue management as I was listening to whatever was out there on YouTube. Specifically, I think there are a handful of folks that are pretty good at that on YouTube, including the channel that's just called Event Planning that we can link to. It's this channel basically targeted towards people that are starting out their event planning businesses, and all it is someone standing in front of a whiteboard, like a teacher might, and just sharing like a few like key like bulleted points related to, you know, either creating budgets or learning how much to charge or what you might name your event planning business. And I think those are all really great examples for how you can basically communicate like any information in a super simple way on a video without intense like editing or production.
Yeah, and I think I really dig those kinds of videos because not only are they simple to kind of set up, so if you are a planner, you're watching today's show, and you want to educate maybe your clients that you're working with on a particular thing that they want to do with their event, kind of doing a whiteboard style. I've seen a couple of marketing videos myself where they take a very simple topic and they break it down, you know, they kind of whiteboard the topic. So I think that's a great way to, you know, digest that information simply. And then also you bring up another good point that a lot of people learn with visuals and people are communicating in a visual way. So I've been reading a lot about that in the industry that, you know, that's actually a lot more effective than just text. So, you know, in today's subject, we're talking about content, but that can actually encapsulate, you know, written content and video. So I think you bring up a good point there. And do you have any, you mentioned a handful, so event planning, just a YouTube video, which we'll include in the links after today's show when this goes live on the Endless blog. But are there any other videos or YouTube channels that you watch or blogs that you just, you know, will always read their new posts and things like that you've seen in the industry that are pretty impactful?
Yeah, so Yeah, I'll give you some examples on like both the video and the written side. So in terms
Mm-hmm.
of video, that one I mentioned, the channel, it's just called Event Planning.
Mm-hmm.
There's another channel called Event Planning Blueprint TV. Um, Obviously, a lot of the content on the Hello and Endless channel, if you're watching this, you already know about it, is pretty relevant. But I think those are great because not only is the content relevant to planners, but they're also videos that are done well that can be used as an example. And on the written side, I'm going to go ahead and plug the Social Tables blog.
Woo!
We put a lot of information out there that I think is relevant and I think is written in a way that's deliberately made to be easy to follow and easy to read and instantly applicable, something that you can take with you. I think if you're going to look for more examples on how to kick off your content marketing in a blog format, the HubSpot blog is probably the best place to start. HubSpot is basically a marketing sales tool for businesses that are kind of capturing and managing leads. It's kind of like a CRM, but they are kind of known to have invented inbound marketing, and along with it, content marketing. So they've been doing it for the longest, and their content is a good template for how you might want to structure your blog posts or your ebooks for whatever it is your audience is.
Yeah, and actually, fun fact about HubSpot, they were a guest on Event Icons. We had one of their event planners
Oh, awesome.
on the show. But yeah, oh, we have a question in from our friend Alex. Are you going to Inbound? So Inbound is the big event that HubSpot actually hosts for marketers. So are you going to that?
No, I would love to go. Maybe I'll have to ask our boss.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, it is known as probably the best event for digital marketers and content marketers, probably only behind Dreamforce, which is the Salesforce event, which is more for sales and sales operations.
Mm-hmm. And actually, right now, I think Content Marketing World is happening as well.
Right.
Yeah, so I think that's actually happening as we speak. So if anybody is watching this show live, let us know how it's going. Cool. All right. Awesome resources there. I also want to give a shout out to Skift. If anybody reads Skift, it's actually geared a little bit more towards hotels, but because there's so much group business they do with planners, they cover a lot of topics related to the events industry and definitely a lot of technology with hotels, which I personally think will benefit event planners who host their events at those hotels. Because then they pretty much automatically get access to these really cool tech tools to put on their events. So sweet. All right.
Yeah, their site is really well done. A lot of good, more about the landscape and of the industry and like a top-down view on things, which is really great.
Yeah. So let's kind of reshift focus here to talk about content and its relation to the industry. So why do you think content is so important to the events industry, and why should planners even read content? Period.
Sure. So, I mean, I think fundamentally, all of the top performers in whatever industry it is, whatever your job is, if you're a top performer, you're someone that is always trying to educate yourself, and you're always trying to figure out what that new thing is that's going to help you either create a better event experience or create a better check-in flow or whatever little aspect of your event that you think you can improve. You're always researching what that might be. And I think today it's just so easy to create not only content but also solutions to these problems in the form of different businesses and apps and services that we always have this ability to get better or to try that new thing. And a lot of times content is the best way to first realize if there's a new service or a tool that's right for you that can improve your event, and how to best implement it. I think fundamentally, like everyone just will always want to educate themselves, and like that's why it's there. That's why it exists. For any industry. Specifically, though, for the event industry, I think this is kind of an interesting time, just because historically, event planners have been kind of behind on most, not just technological trends, but also like media trends, which means that content has like really ramped up in event planning only in maybe the last like 2 to 3 years, which means there's a lot of opportunity for planners to either for businesses who work with event planners to reach them through content marketing, or for planners themselves to use that as a new channel to either drum up interest for their events or connect with their attendees in between recurring events. And I think it's kind of like an untapped channel, even today, for event planners, and specifically event planners that manage their own small businesses.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a way. I think you kind of touched on this part, but it's really a way for people to build that thought leadership in the industry and show it's sort of like a soft sell almost, where something that's really big in the planning industry, because it's so relationship based, is building up that trust. And I think that people can see your website and see how well put together it is. They might be able to read testimonials or even see video testimonials from your clients. But I think a way that certain planners, the ones that we all know and love, the Liz Kings, the Kristen Bantas of the world, I think one of the ways that they really are able to get their brand out is through content via, thought leadership. And I think that, I'm going to have to agree with you on the fact that it's an untapped resource for a lot of these companies. And why do you think it's an untapped resource?
I think mainly because I don't know exactly, but it doesn't seem like a lot of planners see it as an opportunity. Like it's exactly what you're saying, where like all of us as individuals and our businesses like can become their own platforms. Mm-hmm. All we really have to do is put out something new and engaging ideas and content on a regular basis, mm-hmm. that we can share directly with our audiences, that kind of like you were saying, like solidifies like that relationship with people that we've worked with in the past, or people that we might work with in the future. But I think a lot of times we tend to think of publishing articles or videos as something that you would need like a big studio or a writing team to do. But the reality of it is like that's not the case anymore. Like we can all do it. I think we just need to see more leaders in our industry step up and actually do it. So, like you mentioned with Liz King and Kristen Banda, who now has her own Bravo show, those are like two different kind of levels of like how far you can go with becoming your own platform. But you can like really also end up anywhere in between that. You can be someone who publishes a weekly email newsletter just to stay in touch with your handful or maybe 20 customers. And that alone can make a huge difference when it comes to future events, or it comes to staying fresh in your customers' minds, your clients' minds. Yeah. I think increasingly people are thinking of it more, but it's just we're reaching that tipping point.
Yeah, and we got a question in from the audience. So event organizers, which you sort of touched on, but I have a follow-up here. Event organizers can get very busy leading up to the event. How can we juggle content creation when our resources are limited? So you had a couple of suggestions there. So even something as simple as an email newsletter is a good way of staying in touch. What are some ways that you've seen that have been effective in reaching your audience, and how exactly do you determine what kind of medium, content medium, you're going to use to reach your audience? Sure.
So to answer that question, like I agree, that's a huge challenge, especially for folks working in an industry where they're a lot of times are on call 24/7 for clients. But I think it's also a unique opportunity to kind of document what it is that you do and turn that into something that's educational. So odds are when you're kicking off a new event, you're going to use a budget template, or you're going to create your own new budget template that's unique to the specifics of this kind of event. like knowing how to do that alone, you can easily adapt the steps that you take in your day-to-day work and bullet it out and say, oh, this is how you budget out a wedding for 500 people, or this is how you budget out Comic-Con, like Phoenix Comic-Con, for whatever. So I think the trick is trying to find ways to like repurpose the things that you're doing day to day, and just make that accessible to an audience, an outside audience. And what was the second part, Laura?
How do you determine, what kind of medium you use? So some people may not even have the time to do a newsletter, which, one company or one planner with the company may say, oh, we already have a long-standing newsletter. Like, how does each kind of person who's running their own events business, or how does each planner decide, like, this is the kind of medium we want to target? Gotcha.
Yeah, so I guess all of that is going to depend on, again, like how busy you are and how frequently you manage events, and the size of the audience that you want to reach for those events. So I think the most important thing is to find a way that you can create repetition in frequency in for your clients or attendees, whoever it may be. So the first way to start that is just through social media. So across like that's just a mini, more bite-sized form of content. So the easiest way that you can think to add something in your tweets or create Instagram posts that are in some way like educational, that are going to keep people following along, start with that and do that, once a day or a handful of times a week. And then after you do that a certain amount of times, you can kind of use your gems of wisdom or information that you're sharing on social, and compile it into a newsletter or compile it into a blog post. And you can kind of find ways to repurpose and just kind of share everything across each channel. I think ultimately it comes down to trying to be everywhere, because odds are your customers and your clients are going to be everywhere. So you just have to find a way to reach them with the right frequency that works for you across all those channels, whether it's your blog, videos, or even social.
All right, and we have a follow-up question here. It says, is it important to have consistency, or can event organizers just share content when they have the time? So you think it's a mix of both, or
no? I think it's 100% important to find that one channel where you can be consistent. And I think a lot of times that's going to be social, because the barrier to entry is lower and it is easier to create content. But at the end of the day, you really want to find a way that you can like reach people multiple times a day or over and over again, so that, let's say you've had a successful event experience with someone where you put on this great ballroom gala and you've gotten the client to follow you on Twitter. If your Twitter is empty and silent, you're not gonna, they're not gonna think to reconnect with you. But if you're occasionally tweeting interesting ideas and continuing to kind of like develop your presence, your platform, you just increase your odds that the next year when you reach back out to them, they'll know what you're about, they'll remember the event, and maybe they'll have new ideas from you.
Awesome. Good stuff. Yeah, I think that's really important, that especially for social media. I know it's not quite the topic for today, but I've been to events where pretty big events for the events industry, and if you take a look at their Twitter, it's been quiet since last year's event. So I think it's important to just at least stay top of mind through, between when last year's event ends leading up to the next year, because people are still following you, especially if you earned that follow during the event of last year's event. Like, you want to keep that up. You don't want to lose followers and have to kind of redrum up the interest next year. So that's actually a really good point there. And then also, one thing that I'll add is when it comes to even figuring out what kind of message resonates best with your audience, I know that one area where planners struggle is just knowing where to look. And I would say, Facebook, if you decide to use Facebook, it's where we actually at Social Tables have one of the largest social followings, is a lot of these analytics panels are actually built in. So on Facebook, it's called Facebook Insights. So you can actually take a look and see which posts had the most engagement, who commented the most, who favorited things the most. Twitter has it as well. So it's a good place to look if you have no idea, what kind of posts resonate with your audience. So
yeah, and I think it is tough to like take the time to create like a whole blog post, for example. But that's why, like, when you do have the time, like, you can use social to like really extend your content and make it work for you like over the course of weeks and months. So if I have 10 ideas for, summer weddings or spring wedding trends, like, that should also be like 10 plus social media posts that can go out over the course of the next few weeks. So you can really extend the life of your writing or the videos that you create, as long as you kind of think about it strategically and incorporate social as well.
Mm-hmm. Good tidbit there. So you've kind of segued nicely into my next question about topics, and how do you even go about picking the topics that you shoot videos for or write content for?
Sure. So I think the best way to start is by researching what your audience would be searching for online in the first place. So if you're, let's say you're a wedding planner, just an easier example, odds are the clients and like the couples that you work with, they've been thinking about every little detail of their wedding. So there's no reason that you can't have an article that answers all of the questions about every little detail that they might have before they may have it. So if let's say you're in Phoenix, for example, people are going to be looking for wedding venues in Phoenix. But let's say your wedding venue, wedding venues with a particular niche. So you can be creating articles about wedding venues that are outdoors, or wedding venues that are offbeat, or wedding venues that, are at the top of a skyscraper. So that's one example there, where look at your customer, look at your client, and think about all the little questions that they could have, and then write an article responding to all of those questions. And there are various tools online that make it easy to research the exact keywords that people are searching in Google related to your audience. So a lot of people are searching wedding venues. They're searching wedding layouts, menu items, all of these things that could serendipitously get a couple to your page from a Google search. All of those things would be relevant keywords for you to write an article about.
Awesome. And then how do you determine if something is a particular topic resonated with your audience? Like, what are some of those indicators that show that, hey, this was successful, let's keep writing about it?
Sure. So there are two ways that we do it. One way is just like sheer traffic. So are people getting to the page consistently? And usually just having those impressions is going to be good for your brand. It gets your brand out there. Like you said earlier, it solidifies you as a thought leader. People are seeing your posts or your videos. But the other way, and it's a little trickier to track, but you can do it with most with tools like Google Analytics, is actually tracking when someone sees your blog post, how likely are they to then click on your contact form on your website. So you might start to learn that certain posts don't get as many visits, but the people that do see those articles end up contacting you at a higher rate than other posts. So those are the two ways that we do it. And once we learn that we have a post that results in a lot of clicks back to our website or back to different parts of where people can explore our products. Those are the topics that we know to kind of start doubling down on. And you can do the same exact thing no matter what topics you're writing about.
Awesome. So my next question, now we're kind of getting more into, like philosophical questions about the role of content in the events industry. So I'm very excited to ask you this question. What is a telltale sign of a bad blog post or piece of content? What are some of the signs?
Okay, so the first few things is, I would say, so most, okay, I'll preface it by saying that most planners, if someone is coming across your content through an online search or maybe across social media, a lot of times it doesn't mean that it means that they don't know who you are and they don't necessarily know your brand. And that's a big mistake that a lot of planners will make when they start off writing a blog post. They'll make it everything from a first-person perspective, and they'll talk about specific times when something went wrong and they had to fix it, or in their opinion, why certain things work and why certain things don't work. And if you're just starting out, you're not going to have that level. Your brand's not going to be at that level where you can really necessarily get away with that. So usually when I see that, that's the red flag for me. I think the first thing you got to do is just put in very short, actionable insights, very bulleted, very clear. So when I see just a lot of text and a lot of like, I believe, I did this, we did this, that's the first indicator that this isn't something that's going to resonate with me or a broader audience.
Oh, interesting. So something that's not really, it's too objective? No, subjective. It's
right.
Subjective. Yeah. Okay, interesting. Okay. What else?
So that's one thing. I think a lack of visuals is also very telling. Like you said earlier, people just can like interpret imagery so much faster. So finding a way to like combine whatever it is that you're describing with like a good visual will always help it like stick in someone's mind. So don't just talk about the things that you would put on your event check-in table. Maybe draw like a sketch of what a good event check-in table looks like, or take a picture of recent check-in tables that you've set up at events. So yeah, you always try to use images wherever possible. Also, I think in terms of bad content, if a post is too short, people have like the shortest attention span, so we'll jump in, jump right out, not really get anything out of it. I think it's that combination of using visuals, being very clear, and really the most important one to me is creating actionable steps that people can take away with like right away and start implementing in their events day to day.
Yeah, I've read some posts where it's just kind of like a laundry list of problems people see in the events industry, yet they make no suggestion on how to change it. Or, if I'm a planner and I can identify with that problem, I'm looking to this piece of content to help me solve that issue. And so it's always disheartening getting to the end of the blog post and then finding that it offers no advice.
Right.
And you're just kind of like, oh, well, I just wasted some time reading this blog post and I got nothing out of it. So
exactly. Yes, especially like in the early going, like you should expect that everyone who sees your website and sees your articles, they need a solution. They need an answer to their question, not a more like philosophical, broader kind of something
like that
that
kind
they
of
can
approach to writing. Yeah. I've read some where it's from like the company CEO, and it's like this very like fluffy post about like their business, and I know that those posts do nothing for me. Even though these are great companies, it's just kind of like, do I want to spend 5 minutes reading these blog posts about the company that are very self-promotional, or do I want to learn, 10 ways to, build an events budget? I'd probably be more geared towards the event budget post. But
Right.
yeah.
Alternatively, I guess the one place where I would make an exception there is if you're writing something that is also designed to be more of a case study. So in the times that you've had like a client with a great experience and you can get them to share a quote and you can talk about everything that you did for them and you're distributing that in a way that your prospects will see it, that's a time when I think it makes sense to talk about yourself and your approach to the event and why it resonated with the client. It really comes down to like assuming that one person that's going to see your post hasn't interacted with your brand before, and another that has and has the potential to become a customer very soon.
True. We have another question from the audience. So if you haven't used the question panel, highly encourage you to do so. So we have 2 questions in. I have certain feelings about this one, but I'll ask you, is perfection important when creating content? Does it have to be polished? What do you think?
Well, I think the short answer to that is yes. I think we are so quick to judge as like humans and so impatient, like we said earlier, where if you see something that looks like it's unprofessional, you're just going to click away. So I agree with that, but I also think that you also need to come off as being colloquial and just being like anybody else. So there are probably certain grammar rules that are okay to break as long as it brings more personality to what you're saying. And I think there's like an element of like being playful and like the look of your content and the images that you use and the look of your website that can actually do more for you. Depending on, again, like your audience, and it doesn't always, it won't always resonate with certain audiences to be squeaky clean. Sometimes you want to reach people with like a more interesting, edgy sort of brand approach.
Yeah.
What do you think?
So I would say yes, absolutely, because I've seen way too much content out there, and this is more on the written side, where it was really unpolished. It was, riddled with typos, and it didn't really have a good look to it.
Right.
But I will say that there are certain content channels that I think are more suited for sort of like the unpolished look of things. Great example is, again, kind of like reverting back to social media. I think Facebook Live is a great way to kind of show that off. I always get excited when I see sort of like behind the scenes looks, before an event happens, where the planner actually takes you on like a quick little tour, because then it feels like you're there with him or her. So I think those are ones where it's totally. It would look weird if the person had like a full camera crew. Then it feels kind of like Entertainment Tonight, which is cool too, I guess. But I mean, the reality is that most planners don't have that kind of access to professional video equipment, or maybe they do. But those are things that I really like. They're kind of off the cuff. And same thing with when people go live on Twitter. We kind of want to see like the visceral, like behind the scenes. And it's the same thing with Snapchat too. Is you're like live in person and seeing it from that person's point of view. So
I agree. I think it can be both. And I guess the only time that you don't want to be too polished is like at the expense of not being authentic.
Oh, true.
Which is like you said, like Facebook Live and Snapchat and Twitter are like some of the best platforms to show authenticity.
Yeah, and what do you think the role of authenticity plays in content? You've kind of touched on it, but like, can you be too authentic? Is there a line that you draw on content?
Yeah. I mean, I think kind of like what I was getting to earlier is like when you do talk about anecdotes and like what you've learned in the industry, that's very authentic, but it's not necessarily what someone is looking for when they're they're searching for information. So I think that's the one extreme.
Yeah.
And then the other extreme is authenticity, or that's that extreme. The other extreme is it coming off as too polished and not having any personality. So I think there's definitely a middle ground there, and you can kind of veer towards different sides of the extreme depending on what platform you're on. So like on social, it can be more about your personal brand and what you're doing today. On your site, it can be more about educational, like how you do your job, how you put on events, what you can teach other people, and then this is a topic for another day, but like in advertising, that's somewhere where you want to be crystal clear and like to the point.
Yeah. So we have another question in. Is there a generational divide in the way we consume content?
I would say so. I think that increasingly you're seeing people gravitates towards video because that's where a lot of the younger generation has been. So I know, like, if you know any teenagers today, you probably know that they don't flip on the TV and they just have a dozen YouTube channels that they go through every day after school. And as that continues to grow, that's going to have an impact on everyone else. But what might be smart is, if you know that your audience is of an older generation, is to start with something like email, just because it's a place where people are more comfortable in, rather than YouTube or rather than Snapchat. I think those are safe bets, because they'll continue to grow. But if you know your audience is a little older, I think email is a better place to see like what's resonating. So newsletters linking back to your site, or newsletters linking them out to other places.
Right, because you know that everybody, I mean, I think this goes for even across generations, where, you know, everybody's going to read their email at some point. So yeah, I would agree that it's definitely a safe bet to, you know, there's really no harm done if you send a newsletter maybe once this month, once next month, and then, you know, maybe the month after that, and just kind of see how they perform. And if you see an uptick in people opening it and clicking through, and you can use heat map tools for that too, to see exactly where people are looking. I think that's a cool way to kind of test the waters and see, you know, especially with the medium that everybody's reading. So
right, yeah, because you're never going to get someone to, usually you're not going to get someone to download an app like Snapchat just for you. Usually you have to like wait for them to download it because all their friends are on it. And if that's not going to be the case for your audience, then just forget about it. Just stick with something we all have, like email, and kind of learn from there.
Yeah. Here's another philosophical question for you. What would you change about how content is created in the industry for planners?
I guess kind of mentioned earlier, the first thing I would change is to like encourage people to start with actionable information. The other thing is, I would just encourage people to gravitate towards video as much as possible. So I think we're again at a tipping point where video is just becoming so much more easy to create and so much more ubiquitous, that if you don't have a presence on a video platform, you're going to have a hard time finding a presence anywhere. So try to think of ways to make it. Video production is hard, but try to think of ways to make it easier for yourself. So like we mentioned earlier, just why not put up a camera up against a whiteboard and pretend you're a teacher sharing information, or make it a conversation, like make an interview, kind of like what we're doing right now. So find the various ways that like you can make video easier for yourself, and really try to get on board that bandwagon.
Yeah. So we have a question in from the audience. is content a if you make it they will come type situation? If not, how do I get people to see my content?
So my answer to that is no. There have been countless blog posts that I've written and put a lot of time into that I was certain that people were going to read, and nobody showed up. I think the first way is to start, before you start writing anything, is to do your research and determine if people are searching for that topic. Like I said, there are a couple of tools that tell you like how often people are searching for various keywords. And if you do your own search for those keywords and see that there's not really an article serving those search terms, that's a great opportunity for you. So if you've done your research and you can and you're able to determine what people are searching to begin with, that's the best way to really go about like starting to write an article.
Right,
Otherwise,
yeah.
you're gonna get. Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh no, go ahead. Otherwise,
Yeah.
we're gonna get what? That's suspense. I'm not the edge of my seat.
Just gonna say, we get into these situations where you're working all day and you're going by gut, and the best you can do is put it out on social, which is not bad, but it's not the best way to expand the reach of that article.
Right, and also with just kind of posting it on social and kind of being done with it. We're living in an age where everybody's putting out content at rapid speeds, and the way that people consume content now is like this, is like
right,
just kind of scrolling through Twitter.
Right.
I know that's how I read Twitter, and so I think that if you continually to put out content that nobody's really interested in reading, then that kind of becomes easier to ignore. So I think it's good to kind of deliver on what people are looking for. So great tidbit there. So I can't believe it. We're already almost at the top of the hour. So we like to wrap up every show with two of the same questions. So question number one is, if you could only pick one, what is your one tip you have to share with event planners? For event planners.
One tip. Something that we discussed today?
It could be anything. Could be anything.
I think my biggest tip would be kind of the combination of start building your platform as soon as you can around your brand or around yourself, and start doing it on video. Start doing it through video content as soon as you can. The better that you can get at that today, the more likely it's going to pay off for you in the near future.
Oh, wow. Okay. And then do you have any new and cool resources you want to share? And these can be related to events or not, or related to content or not. Websites, blogs, books, gadgets, apps, your favorite scuba mask, anything else. We did have somebody share their favorite scuba mask, which was kind of
That's so cool. In terms of websites, again, I've got to mention the HubSpot site. Definitely subscribe to that one. It's one of my favorites. I should have prepared a list here.
Are you reading any books that would be interesting for our audience to read?
So the one book that I'm reading is called Essentialism, and the one reason that might be great for planners is that it helps you from a business perspective determine when to say no to things, and how if you say no strategically, it can actually help your sanity and help your business. So that's definitely one that I'd recommend. In terms of gadgets, I recently learned about this hot plate that's made by the team that produces the Tasty videos, which, by the way,
yeah. I know about this
videos,
hot plate.
Yeah, that's another great example of just really good content created for a very specific medium, which is Facebook, and just done really well, and Instagram. But anyway, they have this hot plate that you can plug into your Wi-Fi, or connect to your Wi-Fi, and connect to the recipes that they've built into it, and it'll just automatically change temperatures based on when it knows to do that based on the recipe. So all you have to do is put your ingredients in. It's going to change temperature. It's going to tell you when to put on another pot. And it's a really cool implementation of content with these videos that are really sweet and fun to watch about recipes and an actual cooking device. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that actually blew my mind. I think it's, I don't know, is that considered the Internet of Things?
Yeah.
That's a whole other topic for another show, but
yeah.
Yeah.
Which
Sweet.
is also coming to events.
It is. That'll be our next topic. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. That was great. I learned a ton, which
Thanks so much for having me, Laura. It was super fun.
Yeah. And thanks for everybody for tuning into today's episode. It will be live on the site. You can watch the broadcast, download the audio, and read all of David's resources that he shared on today's episode. And we will see you next week for another interview with another event icon. We will see you then.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for joining us for another amazing episode of #Event Icons. To catch the transcription and all of the resources mentioned, head to www.helloendless.com/blog. This week's episode will be posted and available by next Tuesday. Also, let us know what you thought about this week's episode. Share your biggest takeaway and join the Twitter conversation sponsored by Alex Plaxon and Little Bird Told Media. Just tag your post with #Event Icons. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you again for joining us. We'll see you next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, right here on #Event Icons.